Welcome back to Football on the 40. I'm your host, Bowen, and this week we are back at full strength. Andy and Kevin are both back with me today, and this show is produced by Hamilton. Our Horns are coming off a nice win against Florida, where the team looked much improved. Everything was firing on all cylinders, and Quinn played a nice game. So all the Quinn deniers had a really rough weekend. He threw 5 TDs, and we got to see Arch and the twos running quite a bit in the second half. So that was always nice to get those guys some playing time. And when the CFP poll comes out, I think we're likely to move till number 4 into the rankings after Georgia's loss, especially. So this week we face a Arkansas Razorbacks team at home in Fayetteville. They have had a decent medium season. They are hovering around the mid to lower tier of the SEC at 3-3 in conference play. But listeners, I'm sure y'all might remember during Sarkisian's first season back in 2021, we had a really rough showing against them where it was kind of like a not necessarily welcome to the SEC because obviously we weren't in the SEC yet at that point, but it was a time and honored tradition of digging on non-SEC play and definitely a warning that Fayetteville going into Fayetteville is tough, especially for a historic rivalry like we have with Arkansas. So we'll get into all that and more this episode, but we'll start out first, fellas. Let's get into it. How was y'all's weekend, Andy? I know you went to the game. How was your experience there? And Kev, I want to hear about your weekend as well. Andy, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, it was a good weekend. I saw you, Bowen, in Austin Friday night with Jake and all the misses. So that was fun. We got some dessert together. So good times there. Saturday was good. We only stayed for a half based on just how the game was going, based on how Mary Page was feeling with her pregnancy. She's kind of getting further along. So a little bit harder to kind of stay in the sun that long. But it worked out. It really wasn't that close. So we did not stay eyes to eyes, but I still had a great time. There are a ton of Florida fans there. I knew they probably would travel well, but I didn't think they would travel this well just based on how their season had gone up to this point. But I would say there were probably 15, 20,000 Florida fans there.
Wow.
So quite a bit. I mean, the whole upper deck on the west side, probably for about 10, 15 rows were all Florida fans. So, I mean,
Were there
it
more
was a lot of Florida fans for sure.
were there more Florida fans than there were Texas fans at the big house, ratio wise?
Yeah, I would say probably ratio wise because
Oh,
if you think about it, like the big house has another 10,000 people, larger capacity than DKR. So I don't know. It was probably pretty close, to be
hmm,
honest.
nice.
But yeah, I mean, there were a lot of Florida fans, a lot of Florida fans. But yeah, Kev, how was your weekend? What did you do?
It was good. I started feeling better about mid next week, and we had a really busy weekend with like hanging out with friends and some family events. I actually watched the Texas game just with Laurel and myself and Hayes, so it wasn't the typical Houston crowd with a lot of people, but it was an awesome game to watch. Like a couple weeks ago, I think during our last bye week, I was saying like the team just doesn't look like it's getting better. Like we continue to play one good half of football and not really look like we were fixing some of these mistakes and regaining offensive efficiency and everything. And like you were saying, Bo, I've been hard on Quinn, but he silenced a lot of the doubters and played really well. And I think one of my favorite things about the game was just some of the new play calls that we saw with like the triple option handoff thing and the fake to the flat with the deep shot to Golden, I think, for the touchdown. Like some of the offense we ran was new look stuff, which was fun to watch. And I'm left wondering like why we pulled that out against Florida and not Georgia or some other teams, or why didn't we keep that in the bag? Um, but yeah, really good performance for the most part. They stayed injury free and had a good weekend. I listened
Yeah.
to y'all's episode when I was out, and you guys killed it. Appreciate the flack for me taking advantage of our company's PTO policy. So try to be better going forward.
No, we're glad you're feeling better, Kev, and definitely missed you
Hmm.
last week, but glad you got some rest. And yeah, I mean, I think Kev, you called it out like either last episode that you were on or 2 weeks ago where, we kind of talked about like Helm's inability to play down the seam, and we saw it like this
Hmm.
game. Like he pulled it out and he was wide open. So like I don't think Florida was ready for that at all, and they didn't cover that at all. And then yeah, the pump fake, Quinn's never pumped like that at all. That
Mm-mm.
was so like that was just such an easy way to get the DBs up a little bit and open that up. So that was yeah, very, very welcome sight to see, especially with the we're one down in a very tough November into the regular season, right? So we've had Florida and we'll have Arkansas this week, Kentucky, and then everyone's got eyes on College Station. So yeah, definitely at least we pulled it out now and not never, but definitely would have loved to have seen that against the Bulldogs earlier. But yeah, I had a pretty good weekend too. I spent the um uh during the game we weren't able to go because one of our good friends had a baby shower, so we were happy to celebrate with them. So I was just keeping an eye on the group text and on ESPN when I could do so without catching a stray glance from other folks there, and so I was able to watch it afterwards, and it was definitely good to soak it in. So yeah, I think we're all pleased with the Florida performance. Coach Sark also kind of mentioned the same thing, Kevin, you mentioned around like when all three phases are all firing at the same time, like that is recipe for good football. And I think drilling that into the team, especially this week, will be great to see. So, Andy, why don't you take us into Arkansas, get us started with those fast facts?
Ooh, pigs, hooey. Okay, let's get into these fast facts. Okay, let's start with number one. Like every week, we're gonna have five. Um, so number one, this is a shout out to Shannon, Kevin's sister. Arkansas had a women's basketball team before a men's basketball team. You usually do not find that, but that was the case at Arkansas. Um, Now the women's team was not an official university team, but really kind of was. Um, but yeah, they started before 1910. The men started in 1923. I just thought that was pretty interesting. Usually not the case at most universities. Number two, University of Arkansas has played over 200 games at War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock. Now, for people that are not geography nerds, Little Rock is about 3 hours away from Fayetteville. So imagine if Texas played, you know, for the last 60 years, um, 200 games roughly in Houston or Dallas. That just would be kind of a weird concept to think about. It would be pretty annoying if you're a student at Arkansas. But yeah, just they've played a lot of games in Little Rock and they have more of a fan base in Little Rock. It makes sense, but just kind of annoying that I'm sure for some of the students over the years, how many games they've played at War Memorial Stadium. But they don't play there that often anymore. I think they play there like once every 2 years now. Number three, Frank Broyles, who is the winningest coach in Arkansas history. He was an employee at Arkansas for about 50 years. He was there as a coach for about 20, was an AD for about 30. So he was there for a long time. He was really good friends with DKR, actually, and they both retired after the same game in 1976. So kind of shows the bond that they had, and DKR throughout the years got the best of Frank Broyles. I think DKR was like 14-5 over Broyles throughout the years. So, um, okay, number four, Kevin's guys, Bill and Hillary Clinton, both taught law school at the University of Arkansas in the 1970s. No comment from Kevin there. Okay, going on. Uh, Kev, do you want to say anything about your guys?
Not really, no. No.
And then number five, always as always, we're going to go over the famous alumni. Um, the Walton family, not Sam, so not the original founder of Walmart, but his sons, Jim and Rob, both attended Arkansas. Doug McMillan, who's the current CEO of Walmart, went to Arkansas. John Tyson of Tyson's Foods current chairman, used to be the CEO. Jerry Jones, everyone's favorite owner in the NFL. Jimmy Johnson. Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson actually played on the same football team at University of Arkansas and won a national championship in 1964. Barry Switzer, famous OU coach, learned his cheating ways at University of Arkansas. Pat Summerall, all-time announcer, um, he played football at University of Arkansas as well. And then for all the ladies out there, Ben Rector, heartthrob, he went there as well. So, yeah, anything that y'all want to add, anything that like, caught your eye from just the facts about Arkansas?
I forgot that Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson were on the same team. That's cool. And
Yeah.
I know Jerry's a big Arkansas fan. I would just say generally like having had been to Fayetteville, Fayetteville is gorgeous. It's a
Mm.
really beautiful little town or city. There's a lot of like parks and hiking trails around there. It's set into I don't know if it's in the Ozarks or the edges of the Ozarks, but it's pretty similar to Texas Hill Country, but just with more dense forest. It's really beautiful. Bowen, how about you? I got one bonus one I wanted to mention too.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't been to Fayetteville, but I've been to Little Rock and like Hot Springs, Arkansas with on a family trip, and I just remember it being beautiful. Do want to
Yeah.
go like camping up there in the Ozarks at some point. It'd be fun to take the fam up there sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've heard great things too.
The last cool fact I was going to mention that I found when I was reading up on Sam Pittman was Arkansas has three rivalry games in which the winner gets a trophy, which I found really interesting. I think we only have one with the Hat playing against OU. And the most interesting part of that is Arkansas famously hates Texas, and it's a rivalry with a lot of history that we'll get into soon. But Texas is not one of these trophy rivalry games for Arkansas. So like half of their schedule every season is, you know, a big rivalry game. But their three trophy rivalry games are A&M, LSU, and Missouri. Um, I alluded to the history and the significance of this rivalry that we want to talk about, especially because we haven't played them very much, being in the Big 12. But um, this game, I want to say started pre 1900. So we've got jotted down here that 1894 was the first game between Texas and Arkansas. Texas is pretty dominant in this series. We've won. Um, actually, no, this is Arkansas's record for the entirety of their football program, right? So they're 743 and 540 with 40 ties, so almost 60% in their history. A good football program, and they've been in they were in the Southwest Conference with Texas from 1915 to 1991, where we played, most of our heyday games against them. There's a couple famous matchups that Andy you might bring up. Um, They've won one national championship. It was in 1964. And here's what I was trying to get to earlier. Against Arkansas, Texas has been really dominant. Although we've lost, I think, the last two matchups against Arkansas, one in a bowl game against Brett Bielema and one against Sam Pittman in Fayetteville a few years back. Texas is 53 and 26 against Arkansas historically. So we hope to add one to that tally this weekend too. You want to talk about significant matchups like famous games, Andrew?
Yeah, for sure. And just one more thing about Arkansas, Texas played them for a long time, as Kevin mentioned. And yeah, they were one of the original kind of movers of the modern realignment era. So back in 1991, they switched to the SEC with South Carolina. And it was a slow process after that, but they kind of triggered what is now the modern era of realignment. So it is interesting that like you kind of can point back to that time, and obviously, a lot has changed since the early '90s. So, but yeah, going back to the game of the century. So there's college football nerds out there. There's a lot of games of the century. So this is not the only one during this time period, but um, yeah, I think this has a really good case of being one of the best games of the 1900s in college football. There was a lot of significance to this game. So, how just kind of a little bit of a background. This game was originally supposed to be in the middle of the season. Texas and Arkansas, I think before the season started, agreed to move the game to the very last week of the season. And actually, the rest of college football had finished their season, if I remember correctly. And Texas Arkansas was a standalone game a week after the season ended. And so Arkansas was number two, Texas was number one. Ohio State the week before, they were number one, but lost to Michigan. Penn State was undefeated at the time. But Nixon said before coming to this game that he was going to hand out a plaque, and the plaque would say the national championship or national champion to the winner of this game. So that kind of stirred up some controversy nationally because Penn State felt like they deserved an opportunity to win a national championship, and it was before the bowl game. So it was just kind of interesting back then how they awarded national championships. I'm not going to dive into that anymore, but at the game, like I mentioned before, Richard Nixon was there. H.W. Bush was there. He was a representative of Texas at the time. And then Billy Graham was also there. And he started out the game with an opening prayer, which big fan of Billy Graham, but there's no way in today's era would the ABC would ever show a game starting out with a prayer. That just is not how life would go right now. There's a lot of interesting nuggets throughout the game. If y'all ever take a chance to kind of just have a rewatch of the game, a lot of things that would not happen in today's football, just either how the game went down, game plan, gameplay, or just the atmosphere overall. But yeah, it was a very close game. Texas ended up winning 15-14, but they were down 14-0 for most of the game. And so started or towards the end of the third quarter, Texas, I think, finally scored a touchdown. And, this was kind of a precursor to how analytics approaches these type of situations in the NFL, especially. But you kind of see this in college football now. Darrell Roll went for two, down 15, or down 14-0. So it was 14-6, went for two, got it. So if Texas scored a touchdown, they would end up winning the game. And if y'all remember back then, there were ties. So you didn't want to end up in a tie, especially of a game of that magnitude. Yeah, then Texas scored late in the fourth quarter after a long pass on fourth down and three. And yeah, Randy Peschel, he was the one guy that caught the pass from James Street. So yeah, overall it was a crazy game. Texas ended up winning it and won the national championship. They also beat Notre Dame in the Cotton Bowl, so they really put a firm grasp on the national championship that year. Just a couple more things about the game. So this was the highest Nielsen rating football game ever in American history. So for the Nielsen rating, for those out there that don't know how it works, it's a percentage of all the households in America with a TV. So back at that time, not every household had a TV, but 52% of the households that did have TVs back then watched that game. And I think the highest Super Bowl was like 49% from what I saw. One of the 49ers Bengals matchups in the 80s got to 49%. So literally this game on a percentage basis of homes that had TVs is the highest rated game ever in history. So just shows the magnitude of this game. It was really important. It decided the national championship. It also helped that it was a standalone game, but yeah, huge game. It's definitely one of the top games in college football history. But yeah, anything else that like kind of caught your eye with that game?
Not really. I think the importance is just understanding the amount that we played them, the the fact that like you will hear commentators on TV talk about how the fan bases feel about one another and explain the game day atmosphere by really reiterating that Arkansas feels like it's a rivalry game and it's not something that the announcers or ABC is making up. Like this is one that has been played, like we said, since before 1900, so it's got a lot of history that's being rekindled or reinvigorated now that we're in the same conference. I think they're a team that will be playing a lot in the SEC, more than teams like Florida for sure, just because of where we are regionally. And I hope that's the case too, because we want to welcome their fans to Austin like they do to us when we go to Fayetteville. You'll see it on Saturday and see what we mean. Um, but we want to preview the game this weekend and the teams this year. Um, Bowen, give us the logistics. Where can we watch? What's the weather looking like?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we have an 11 a.m. kick, which is fantastic for us because generally we don't love the morning, time slots, but compared to the possibility of an evening game again, this is definitely the better outcome for us. Yeah, so we have an 11 a.m. kick in Fayetteville at Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. Reynolds had donated $21 million in 1999 for renovations and stadium naming rights. The game will be on ABC. There's a high of 67 during the game, a 10% chance of rain, and something to highlight, 12-mile-an-hour winds. I'm hoping that it's on the lower side of 12. Like hopefully that's like a high water mark, but wind, I'm still
Well,
scared about the wind for sure. Yeah. But yeah, on the season, Arkansas is 5-4 and they're 3-3 in conference play. Most notably, I think, they came pretty close against A&M and Tennessee, but they're just coming off a loss after the bye week that they just had with a route from Ole Miss. So yeah, they're gonna be well rested, I think, going into this game and ready to take us on. Kevin, why don't you get us into what we should know about the head coach, the offense, all the good stuff.
Yeah, they're in a similar situation, I guess, with a head coach that's got a couple years under his belt, but we're not playing somebody like that's been there for a decade or anything. Their head coach is a real crowd favorite. The media loves him, his players love him, and he fits really well in the Arkansas culture. His name's Sam Pittman. Like I said, really personable guy. You'll see it in um, interviews before the game at halftime and potentially after the game too. He's been coaching since 1984, almost continuously. I saw there was only a 1 year gap on his resume. And a couple notable schools that he's coached for are Tennessee. He was an assistant coach at Arkansas before coming back to be the head coach. And he was, I think, Kirby Smart's first offensive line coach when Kirby Smart came to Georgia. So Sam Pittman's been on teams that have been really good lately and have won national championships. But he came to start as head coach at Arkansas in 2020 at a very low point in the Arkansas program. His first SEC win with Arkansas in 2020 snapped a 20 conference game losing streak for Arkansas. And Sam Pittman's been just under 500 at 28 and 29 at Arkansas since he started in 2020. And we referenced it, but we have played a Sark versus Sam Pittman matchup already in Fayetteville a few years back, and Arkansas beat us pretty bad. I think it was Hudson Card and Casey Thompson. It was kind of a two quarterback game for us, and their defense completely shut us down. Like the 19-point differential there was one of those where we scored late to make it look closer than it really was, from what I can recall. Um, and then I think you found this, Andrew. He's still got 3 years on his contract, and he's got about $20 million that he's still owed. So although Arkansas is having a rough season, I don't think their expectations at the beginning of the year were quite what ours were, and his likelihood of being fired is probably pretty low given how much he's owed and where the team's coming from. Um, on offense, they have a pretty decent rushing attack. They're a better running team than Florida, averaging almost a full yard per carry more than Florida did, what we saw last week. And they've got 25 rushing touchdowns. One interesting thing for us that we're paying attention back in the Herman era is that their leading rusher is Jaquindon Jackson, who was recruited to Texas by Tom Herman as, I think, a quarterback or an athlete. Do you know, Andrew?
Yeah, he was supposed to be a quarterback,
Yeah.
but very quickly realized his future was not going to be a quarterback at Texas.
Yeah, which I think was partly his skill set and that we had a lot of quarterbacks in the quarterback room at the time. But Jaquan Jackson started at Texas, was on the team for a full season, and then transferred to Utah where he played for 3 seasons. And this is his first season at Arkansas, but he's the starting running back there, so we'll see him and we'll see if he has any animosity towards Texas. I'm sure he will, even
He
though it's
is.
been a while.
I will say he is coming off an injury, so I expect him to play, but I think it was an ankle injury. So it will be interesting to see like how healthy he is. They did have a bye week last week, so I would expect probably good things for him this weekend.
Yeah. And thanks for mentioning that. Another one thing I want to note about their rushing attack and kind of transitioning toward their passing attack is I want to say their quarterback, Taylon Green, is their second most leading rusher. And he actually has one more carry than Jaquan Jackson. So they're a dual threat offense, um, similar to what we would have faced against Florida had DJ Lagway played. And that will be something to watch for sure, especially on money downs. Taylor Green's a decent passing quarterback too. He's got over 2,000 yards passing, a 61% completion rate, and 11 touchdowns with 7 interceptions. So not necessarily lethal, but from what I can tell, not the sole reason that they are 5-4 at this point. And then in the passing attack, they also have a tight end that's pretty strong. Luke Hazz has the most receiving touchdowns on the season with on their team with 4, and 3 of those touchdowns for Luke have come in their last 2 games. So they might be finding something on offense with the tight end passing game that we'll have to defend against on Saturday. Anything you want to note offensively, Andrew, in addition
Yeah,
to that?
I mean they're the type of team where they've capitalized on weaker opponents and scored a lot of points. Um, when they've placed when they've played against kind of superior defenses, so like look at Tennessee, look at Ole Miss, look at A&M. Ole Miss they scored 31 points, but a lot of those points were kind of towards the end. At Tennessee they scored only 14 or 19, sorry. A&M they only scored 17. So and LSU too they only scored 10 points. So against the better quality defenses, they haven't scored a ton of points, which it gives me more optimism for this game. I think unless our defense doesn't show up, which I would be surprised, I think our defense will have a good showing on Saturday. So I'm excited about that.
Agreed. Agreed, totally. Similar story there on the defensive side of the ball. They are not a great defensive team, and they're a terrible pass defense. Um, Quick stats to compare our defense and theirs. And I like to say this because it's like we have one of the best defenses we had in so long at Texas this season. So Arkansas has 8 interceptions to Texas's 12 interceptions. They have 4 fumble recoveries to our 5 fumble recoveries, and they have 19 sacks against our 20. So they are a disruptive defense. They have gotten a few turnovers, but they're struggling, and I think it's mostly because of the passing defense, which I'll get to here shortly. Um, Total defense, they're ranked at 90th in the country, and we are ranked second, only giving up 251 yards per game. Last week, we were ranked first, and Ohio State has taken that from us this week. But still, we have a defense that we can be really proud of. So hopefully, we can hold them to very few points. This is the next piece about their passing defense is the key reason why I have a lot of confidence going into this game now. They are out of like 135 teams or something, 124th in pass defense. They're allowing almost 270 yards passing per game, and it's a clear weakness, which lines up very well for our team that does have a rushing identity, but is mostly a passing attack. Um, one thing that I found interesting about their defense and like leading tacklers though was their third leading tackler and player with the most interceptions with 3 interceptions is a defensive back named TJ Metcalf. And I Googled, and he is in fact the cousin of DK Metcalf. So we might hear about that on the broadcast too. But that matchup, Texas offense versus Arkansas defense, and their pass defense especially, is one that we should be able to, um, you know, expose and use to our advantage on Saturday. Going into the season, I was really worried about this one. I felt like in our first year in the SEC, there was no way that the season was going to go as good as we thought it could, and I actually picked a loss this game, but I have totally switched that now. Um, we may disagree when we get into the picks, but I'm pretty optimistic about this matchup.
Yeah, it'll be
Um,
fun watching the passing attack, especially with Isaiah Bond back. I mean, you could tell just how much more dynamic we were. So it's like a
Yeah.
safety blanket for Quinn, especially out there. Um, just so fast, so quick, and Sark mentioned it too. He really, obviously, like him being on the field increases the speed ceiling on the offense and just like really makes us look jump out. So yeah, I'll be for sure paying a close eye on the Arkansas secondary.
yeah,
That'll be a matchup to watch.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I forgot to say this earlier when Bo was kind of giving just background on where the game's being played. We talked about this last week, but um, the guy for Florida, Griffin, um, he paid 20 million in the 80s, right, for the naming
Hmm.
rights, and obviously that's worth more in today's money. But yeah, Reynolds, it looks like he got even a better deal. He only paid 21 million in 1999 and got a stadium named after him. So, it can happen. Yeah, I wonder what the price tag would be for Texas, but yeah, I was kind of surprised how low the dollar amount it was for Reynolds to get his name on the stadium.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like Arkansas, like Kev mentioned the Ozarks. I feel like that's, I mean, not in most recent years, but I feel like it has definitely been like a, newer kind of trendier area that people are like kind of seeing. Before it was like Walmart in Bentonville, and now I feel like it's becoming Arkansas is becoming a pretty cool destination. So yeah, he got in early. Props to Reynolds.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Kev, for breaking down Arkansas and their team this season. Guys, we're heading back to trivia. We missed this last week because of Kevin's absence. All good there, though. Um, but yeah, let's just dive into this a little bit more. So there's going to be two questions this week. I will say these questions are a little bit random, more random than typical weeks. So, yeah, let's just start with the first question. So, as I kind of discussed earlier, Bill Clinton taught at the University of Arkansas. He was a professor of law there in 1974. Do y'all know how much money he made in 1974 as a professor of law? Bowen, you go first. Kevin, you go second. Closest one wins.
74, 74.
Wow. Well, I was supposed to go first, but I also actually had in the 70s in my head. I had 72 in my head.
Oh, I was saying the year to myself.
Oh,
But yeah, I had like I'll say 82,000. I was thinking in the mid 80s.
Okay, so you're going 82,000, Bo. You're going 72.
72.
Y'all are so off. But Bowen, you're technically closer. $14,700.
Oh my
Wow. Dang.
goodness.
Higher ed. Higher ed.
A lot has changed
Yep.
since that time. So, yeah, I was shocked to see how much he made, or how little he made at the time. So, yeah, Bo gets a point there. And I forgot to say this, but Bo's leading 13-11 in the season, and he got a point there, so he's up to 14. If Bowen gets this correct, this next one, um, he will get two more points. However, if Kevin gets it, then Kev will get a point. Um, so yeah, with the second question, Arkansas is home to the worst maritime disaster in U.S. history, which does not make sense because it's a landlocked state. What year did it happen? Kev, you go first. Bowen, you go second.
Man, I don't think this was a chapter in the book that I read a few years ago about worst natural disasters in American history, but maybe it was. Um,
It's not a natural disaster that caused it.
okay, yeah, that's why. Let's see. I'm gonna say 1915.
1915. Okay.
I'll say 1894.
Bo, you're right. You got it. Wow, big week for Bo.
Dang.
Got two questions right,
Wait, what
plus the
was the
two.
year?
So it was 1865,
Oh,
and it's technically in Arkansas. It was on the Mississippi River, so that's the border of Arkansas, and it's right by Memphis. But it was on the Arkansas side of the Mississippi River, where it happened. A steamboat exploded. The boiler on the steamboat exploded. I think killed about 1,200 people.
oh,
Oh my
Um,
jeez.
gosh.
yeah, so I mean, I think killed everyone on board. Um, had to be a pretty big steamboat if it had 1,200 people on it, but yeah, huge explosion, and yeah, the remnants ended up in Arkansas as well. So um, yeah, I was kind of shocked to see that. I did not think the largest maritime disaster was going to be in Arkansas, but it
Yeah, that's
ended up
interesting.
being that. So
Yeah, jeez. All right, another great week for me. Thanks, Andy, for leading that. I hope to continue those trends. I'm starting to sound like a broken record. I think I said that on a previous week's podcast, but it's kind of a similar story. I did not do well in betting corner this week. Neither
you
did
did better
Kevin.
though.
I did better, but fading myself is also not a winning strategy for me, but it continues to be a good strategy for Andy. Andy was up over 2 units this week. Kevin, despite his absence on the pod, did put some bets in, like a proper degenerate. But he was almost down 8 units on the week, and I was almost down 2.5 units, which brings the total. I'm almost down 35 units on the season. Kevin is still slightly in the, or excuse me, Kevin is still in the lead, slightly in the negative after last week's performance at minus 2.5 units, and Andy is followed closely behind at minus 4.3 units. So we still have quite a few weeks left, but the season is winding down as we get into the end of the regular season, and we'll have postseason. But still, we gotta figure something else out. The spread that I see for the game, we are minus 13 and a half. So I think it opened differently, and I think different odds at different on different sports books, but we're minus 13 and a half on the book that we're using. We are Arkansas, excuse me, is plus 430 on the money line. So if you all sense an upset brewing, you can get more than 4-1 on your investment. And the total I see for the game is 57 and a half. So uh, nothing really noticeable about the total. Both, I will say, Texas and Arkansas are both 6-3 against the spread this season. We're like 4-4, we're 4-4 on the over, and Arkansas is 5-4. So nothing too notable trend wise there. But for the game, as y'all know, listeners, we all have to have some skin in the game for our matchup this week. So Kevin, we'll start with you. What are you liking on this matchup against Arkansas?
I like the cover. The fact that it's on the road informs how much I'm going to put on this, but I I like the cover. I'm surprised, honestly, that it's almost a touchdown more than it was against Florida, but maybe the bookies had a good reason for that. I'm gonna put 1 unit on Texas cover. How about you, Andrew?
Uh, yeah. So for at first the cover for this game was close to 17 points. I think now it's 14 and a half, as Bowen said. So originally I felt like 17 points was a little high. 14 and a half, not so much, but I still feel like I'm going against my gut rivalry game at Arkansas. I feel confident that Texas will win, but I could see it potentially being a little bit closer. Arkansas maybe scoring at the end of the game. Uh, but still, give me 2 units on Texas covering this game too. So
Okay. My angle is I'm just gonna pick a thesis. So I think that like Kevin's mentioned and Andy, I feel like you've called out as well. Like our defense is elite. It's gonna be the match I'm watching. Therefore, I'm taking the under on the Arkansas point total. The Arkansas point total with the where the implied total is Arkansas is 20 and a half. So as long as they stay under 21 points, so 21 or under 21, excuse me, that is plus 105. So I'm going to go 4 units on that. It's bet on our defense. I could see it getting out of hand, or not out of hand, but I can see some potential, if the game gets out of hand in our favor, maybe some late scores that would not be ideal. But that is what I'm going to do this week. So I'll do 4 units on the Arkansas under the Arkansas team total. Andy, we're going to bounce back to you. What else are you liking around other games?
So this is a little bit of a hedge. So at the beginning of the year, I placed a 9 unit bet on Georgia to make the playoff. If they went out, they'd probably still make the playoff, but if they lose one more game, they're going to miss it. At this point, it's probably going to be Tennessee to beat them. This is also going against my gut. I don't believe Tennessee will beat Georgia. I don't think they have the offense to do it. But yeah, give me 2 units on Tennessee money line. Um, then also I have two other bets. UTSA has kind of been all over the place this year, close to 500. They played North Texas, who's not a bad team. Um, I'm of course going to take UTSA 2 units on that. And then lastly, Kansas has not proven to be a good team this year. They did beat Iowa State though this past weekend. That was their best win of the year by far. But they've lost a ton of close games. BYU's been in a lot of close games, but they've won all those games. So it just does not make sense for me to take Kansas money line, but I'm going to give me 2 units on Kansas.
I'll start with
Nice.
that one too. I agree with that, and I've been betting on BYU pretty much every week since I think week 2. Um, I did see the Kansas game where they beat Iowa State. They looked really good, but BYU's favored by 3 in that one. I'm going to take 2 units on BYU money line there. Um, I was an LSU fan for a night over the weekend with some friends when they lost to Bama. And I'm going to keep that energy going and bet LSU money line. They play Florida on the road, and LSU is only favored by 4, which I think is way too little. So I'm going to put 2 units on LSU money line. And then also, I like the matchup with Clemson against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's quarterback got a head injury or a concussion in one of their recent games, and he's questionable to play against Clemson, but it being a road game for Clemson, I like the Pittsburgh cover. Right now, Clemson's favored by 10, so I'm going to put 2 units on that too. And that's it for me this week. What else you got, Bowen?
Nice. I think I'm just gonna do that team total. I gotta ease back into it. At least for right now. My Texans, I'm still a little bruised from that loss last night against the Lions where I had their money line, but or I had our money line, excuse me. So I think I'm just gonna take the under on the team total for this week and see how it goes. I also have a 10 unit parlay that I made in the beginning of the season that was not a long shot. It was just minus 110, but it was on Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas all making the playoff, which at the time just seemed like free money. But now it's like if Georgia screws up one more game, like that's just going to be a minus 10 unit bomb just hitting in my waiting in the rafters for me. So yeah, gotta go easy. But yeah, let's see some score predictions, fellas. What are y'all thinking for the game this week? Kev, we'll go to you first.
I'm going to say Texas wins and covers 40-17.
Okay, Andy.
There you go. I got 42-24. So Texas covers as well. Bo.
Okay, I have 38-14. So we're all expecting low heart rate games. I hope the horns pull through for us. Alrighty. Well, folks, we didn't have any mailbags come through, but feel free to drop us one in our Instagram or the link in our Instagram bio, and we can cover them on following shows. And that'll do it for us. Thanks again for listening. And if you hadn't, I had not mentioned this earlier this episode, but please remember to subscribe, like, and comment on the pod. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know if you have any feedback or questions or comments. We'd love to hear from y'all. But if not, hope y'all enjoy the rest of y'all's week. Hope our horns are successful this weekend in Fayetteville, and we'll see y'all on the next football on the 40.
Hook 'em.